Tooralooraloora. Tooraloorala. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. February 1st, 1 month down in 2026. I tell you what, when I was like maybe 7 years old, the day after Christmas is like, oh my God, it's going to be so long before it's the next Christmas. And we got months before we get to like, summer vacation. And it was just like torture. And now I'm in my 50s and it's like, oh my God, 1 month down. Oh my God. It's like summer's going to get hit. The AC is going to be driven bonkers. Oh my God, it's almost Christmas. I probably should start shopping already. It's amazing how it changes the perception from childhood to adulthood on time. But here we are, 1 month of 2026 is over, and the second month has begun. I got a lot of stuff to do today. After this, I gotta make a couple videos. I gotta edit a video. I need to lift weights because I forgot to do it yesterday. It was, I don't know what it was, like 4 o'clock or something yesterday. And my wife's like, "Did you forget to lift weights?" Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did. Anyways, what else is going on today? Well, we got a few things to talk about on the stream today. So let's jump into a couple things. And sadly, a few of the things to talk about are people passing away. Catherine O'Hara, well-known, in recent years from shows like Schitt's Creek. But I mean, we're talking, she was in Second City. We're talking the live kind of improv stuff. She was apparently Gilda Radner's understudy until Gilda left to do SNL. And then she moved up. And then, of course, she was doing SCTV in the 70s and 80s. Did Beetlejuice in 88, Home Alone in 90, Best in Show 2000. Of course, a lot of things in between those. Did a lot of voice work. Witch's Night Out, 1978. One of those things that freaked me out as a kid. She did a little voice work in Rock and Rule, which I did a review of on this channel. The Completely Mental Misadventures of Ed Grimley, don't you know? And of course, Nightmare Before Christmas. So, I mean, she was, and she did dramatic roles as well. It's kind of like every generation probably has something of hers that's their favorite, and they're all, potentially different. Just in a really amazing career in terms of longevity. Never really quite the leading actress, usually part of an ensemble, but always a really strong part of that ensemble. So, yeah, very sad that we lost her. Oh, there's Lady Gwendolyn. Hey, and it was, I think it was, she was 71 years old, but I think it was kind of unexpected. It wasn't the result of a long illness or something of that matter. So very sad. Rest in peace, Catherine O'Hara. Godspeed. Funny story about my best friend back in the day. I don't know how old he was, but I want to say we were probably in our 20s. And I think we got on the topic of Catherine O'Hara, and he says, is it kind of weird that I think she's hot? And I was like, it's like, no, it's not weird. She's kind of hot. Yeah. But I just always remember how he phrased it like that, because it was like, well, but she's not, she's not like the Marilyn Monroe type. I mean, oftentimes she was parodying, those, kind of women like on SCTV. But Yeah, she had beauty and brains and humor and the whole thing. So God bless her. God bless her. And apparently, had kids and I mean, again, I know, but when I lost my mom, I was an adult, and it still hits me to this day. So I know they're going through it right now. So God bless them too. Sadly, though, we also lost Demond Wilson. I am wearing my You Big Dummy shirt in his honor today. 79 years old. Obviously best known for Sanford and Son in the 70s. Was also in the new Odd Couple. There was an Odd Couple show in the 80s. He played Oscar Madison, and I want to say, oh my goodness sakes, his name has just escaped me, but he was on Barney Miller. I think he played Felix. Now I got to look this up. The new Odd Couple. And I can't think of his name either. Yeah, it is him. Ron Glass. Not to be confused with Jan's boyfriend, George Glass. Yeah, Ron Glass played Felix. He played Oscar. He was a Vietnam vet, wounded, served in the U.S. Army, and then went on to become a pastor and a few other things. So God bless Demond Wilson. He was an excellent Tim Burton hooked her up. Oh, with her husband on Beetlejuice. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. I thought it said Tim Burton hooked up with her husband on Beetlejuice. And I was going to say, well, I don't need to talk about that necessarily, but I said, okay, so that's cool. Anyway, Demond Wilson, great straight man to Red Fox. I mean, you got to know when you go into a show like that, with Red Fox, that you're not going to be the one doing most of the jokes. And I mean, Red Fox is going to, with that, personality, especially of the Fred Sanford character, obviously based on a British show, Steptoe and Son. But I mean, it was kind of its own thing. They did their own things with it. It's set in Watts, so there was a whole other side to it because of that. But when you got Red Fox there, you're not going to get to be the main attraction on the show, and to go in and produce that. And then you got not only is you got Red Fox, but you got Aunt Esther. You got Grady at a certain point. I mean, you got a lot of other characters who are a little wild, and that are obviously going to be getting those kind of lines, but did a great job. So rest in peace to Demond Wilson. Godspeed. And then finally, a big one for a lot of us comic book geeks out there. Sal Buscema, our pal Sal, passed away at 89 years old, penciler and inker on such books as The Incredible Hulk. And his is, for a lot of people, sort of the definitive Hulk. And now, obviously, Hulk's gone through a lot of phases since then. So there's other artists who, really left their mark on the character. But this was the Hulk that I think sort of made Hulk a character that would really have a legacy. He hit a real sweet spot on it. Time period where Hulk was getting onto television. I'm not trying to take away, obviously, from Kirby, and others who have worked on it, but he was a very important artist on Hulk. Did awesome stuff on Spectacular. Spider-Man, I remember him from that. Also an amazing run on ROM Space Knight. You take a toy that was in stores for about a year, and a toy that it was an action figure, but it didn't have a massive amount of movement. It had the electronic aspect of it and the interchangeable weapons and all that cool stuff. But, it wasn't, look, frankly, it was not a successful toy. Very well remembered toy, but not a successful toy. And dude, they built a friggin', along with Mantlo, built a comic book that went for years and was heavily involved in the Marvel universe in terms of the dire wraiths and the Wraith War and all that stuff. So, and he was a big part of that. And I think when he was drawing it is when Rom was like 7 or 8 feet, maybe 9 feet tall. He was big. He was much bigger than the average human. It seems like over time, Rom shrank a little bit. I think maybe to bring him more in line with the humans, because there was that need to have the human interaction with him, because he was a man who was basically encased in this armor forever. So he lost a lot from making that transition to fight this galactic war. So that was a big part of the story, but really, really, really awesome stuff. He took over art duties from Walt Simonson on his incredible Thor run that I'm doing now every Monday, going through that. So we'll get to the Sal issues towards the end of the year. And I remember that's kind of when I was starting to read it. And I don't think as a kid, I wasn't super paying attention, but I don't think I really even realized the shift, because he had a style that worked so well with Simonson's. It was kind of seamless, but obviously he is the brother of John Buscema, who we lost a few years back. And just an amazing amount of talent in that family. Ooh, I see Man of War. I got my ROM figure and D&D Homes Basic from the same Kmart in 79. Oh, dude, those are magic friggin' years, dude. The cool stuff. ROM is one that I wanted. I didn't get it. And it's definitely one of those vintage toys I'm on the lookout for. If I can find one that still works, I'd like to add it to the collection, put it on the shelf. Because it's like so, I don't know, emblematic of that time period, the sci-fi aspect, battery operated stuff. It's like, it's a real iconic toy from that period, even though, again, man, it did not ultimately do that well. It was expensive. I was looking it up, and I think that, like, adjusting for inflation, I can't remember what they sold it for then, but I think it would have just been basically a pretty expensive toy. And I think that's what hurt it, is like, and especially you're in like that late 70s. So the Star Wars figures are rolling out. So a decision's got to be made. Am I getting ROM or am I getting like 2 or 3, Star Wars figures or a vehicle for the same price? I think that hurt it. But yeah, ROM and Micronauts though. Oh, dude. It was that 70s pre-Star Wars thing. That like you're between Star Trek, even though that was still popular and still selling toys, but that Star Trek design and the Star Wars design, those are going to be, especially Star Wars design, it's going to dominate from that point on. It frankly, even there's more Star Wars design in some ways in like Star Trek The Next Generation than Star Trek in terms of what the exterior of vehicles look like, right? In original Star Trek, very smooth, very minimalist, because their attitude was, if we're getting to this point in time, you're not going to see rivets. Everything's going to be sort of under. We're going to have very smooth skins, for these ships. Star Wars basically takes a kind of World War II airplane aesthetic to what it's doing. You get lots of fiddly bits, on the exterior of ships. That becomes so popular that you get Star Trek The Motion Picture and look at how they set up the Enterprise there, and that really smooth skin is gone. You still get the right, it's still the same basic shape, but you get a lot more doodads, a lot more visual interest to the skin, and you get that Next Generation stuff as well. And a lot of the spaceships that show up in Next Generation have that design thing. Everything's a lot more, yeah. So Star Wars kind of took over, but between those two, you got an interesting design kind of aesthetic. A lot of smooth, a lot of white, a lot of translucent, a lot of glowing stuff. And Micronauts are part of that. ROM is a part of that. You can even, I think you could even see some of that in how they did V. You know, some of the elements of V have that look to it. But anywho, Man of War says it was a great toy. ROM and the Milton Bradley Big Track. Oh yeah, dude, one of my dumbest friggin' so stupid. I think it was on eBay. Big Track, working Big Track, good price. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm buying it. I'm grabbing it. Shows up. It was not vintage. I did not pay enough attention. It was not vintage. The people did not lie. Maybe they could have been a little more upfront, but they didn't lie. It was there. I was so excited. It was like a miniature version, about yay big. And I have it sitting on my desk at work. But along with a lot of other junk. But yeah, it was like when the box finally arrived, I'm going, I don't think that's right. That looks too small. Is this something else I ordered? I don't open it up. I'm like, oh crap. So that's another one that I'd love to get. Yeah, there was some great stuff in the late 70s. And there was a lot of, because Star Wars hadn't quite taken over yet, you know, everything wasn't a Star Wars knockoff. And because Star Trek was so much earlier, everything wasn't a Star Trek knockoff. So you got this great period in the, I don't know, man, like probably 72 to about 70, about 78, even into the Star Wars period a little bit, of just independent design, like original design for sci-fi stuff. So rad. So rad. But rest in peace, Sal Buscema. Godspeed. One of the absolute greats. I collected a lot of his stuff back in the day. Always loved it. He knew how to draw comics the Marvel way. The action, the setups, the paneling, you know, good design on all of that stuff. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today, and this is in response to I guess it was an article where they were quoting Jim Lee, DC Comics, about a manga and how well it's done. And he was saying, yeah, it's done extremely well. And people are kind of going, Jim Lee discovers manga. I mean, obviously he knew about it, but, it's doing very well. And it does some things that we don't do, blah, 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 blah. Like, and this is the one that always gets brought up, different genres, everything, all American comics, apparently, all of them are superhero. Okay. If you ignore everybody outside of Marvel and DC, and a lot of independent creators now, it's all superhero stuff. And so I kind of made a smart ass little post on Twitter saying, if only a guy like who ran a comic book company could do something about that. And I really was being a smart ass, because people have this view. I think a false view. I think they're losing context on why superhero comics dominate in the United States to the extent that they do. People seem to have an idea that the publishers, Marvel and DC, made a choice to get rid of everything but superheroes, right? And generally speaking, that's not how things work in business. If something is selling well, you keep it around. And Marvel and DC had a lot of books that were not superhero. Now, the majority was the superhero stuff, for sure. But I did a video maybe a couple years ago where I looked at an issue of Amazing Heroes. Amazing Heroes was a magazine about comic books, kind of about the industry, so to speak. interviews with creators, etc. And they would do a preview issue, I guess every year, about, the comic books that were coming up for that year. This is what Marvel and DC are going to be publishing, but not just Marvel and DC. All the indie stuff is in there as well. And so I did a video on the preview for 1985. Now, 85 was a big year. It was a big turning point. We're basically at the end of what people call the Bronze Age in, Marvel and DC comics. Because they're teasing Crisis on Infinite Earths. And I think we're only maybe a year or so away from Secret Wars. But obviously, Crisis on Infinite Earths was huge. And it kind of marks the end of the Bronze Age of comics as things start spinning into a different direction. So I did this thing, flipping through it, and talking about all these different books. I mean, there's a lot of titles, so I didn't go into depth on all of them. But one of the things that I noticed when I went through it was there were a lot of non-superhero comic books. And they weren't all just non-superhero from the indies. Had a lot of non-superhero stuff coming in from Marvel and DC. In 85, they were still trying to push other genres. They didn't just give up on it. The customers gave up on it. So if we go back a little ways, you can start to see comic book sales impacted negatively by the time you're in the late 50s and into the early 60s. There was a big rush from the golden age of comics, right? And obviously, you had superhero stuff, but you had a lot of non-superhero stuff too. Crime, mystery, romance, westerns, war books come in, horror, big genre at one point. By the late 50s, the superhero stuff is starting to fade. DC's still got Batman, Superman. They're still doing like Action Comics, Adventure Comics, which, by the way, there's still an anthology element. There's still some non-superhero stuff in that. World's Finest is still around. But a lot of those are starting to go away. And now they're going to get the revival in the very late 50s. So we're somewhere in the 50s, we're starting to see that. A lot of people will tie it to the Comics Code Authority. But worth remembering, Dell Comics sold like freaking hotcakes. They outsold pretty much everybody. And one of Dell's selling points was, Mom and Dad, you can trust Dell Comics. All that weird, bloody, sort of sexual stuff, not going to be in our books. And they did extraordinarily well. Oh, let's also talk Archie, the Archie stuff, and Archie clones all through this period. So when they say, well, manga has a lot of different genres. Well, so did American comics. And they didn't stop publishing them because they were popular. Romance comics, for example, huge female segment of the audience buying romance and other things as well. They stopped buying comics at a certain point. So the romance comics gradually dwindled. Archie comics stayed pretty strong. But if you look at most of the Archie clones that other companies were producing, most of them do not have long runs. They just don't. Archie kind of hit a sweet spot. I mean, it had some amazing art, from DeCarlo and from Harry Lucy and stuff. But it's sort of like, it kind of bucked the trend of a lot of that stuff. A lot of the humor books started going away. Or really what they started doing was they started shifting into smaller companies. So at some point, Dell, you get a spinoff of Gold Key. They kind of stay active through the 70s and then they start to go away. Fawcett had already given up its comic books earlier. They will end up publishing some comic magazines with Marvel, I believe. I think Marvel was doing some with Fawcett, using them as kind of the publishing arm. But the point is this. We had those things. we had stories, not so much in terms of like graphic novels, but you had episodic storytelling. You could pick it up and read the story, and you didn't need to follow forever. By the way, in the stuff that was not so episodic that would come later, you could still pick them up in the middle of a run and figure out what was going on and collect it as long as you wanted to. And when a new storyline began that you didn't like, you could stop buying it. So this idea that that's a major selling point of manga, it was sort of there. And by the way, we also at some point introduced graphic novels. So previous to the decline in Western comics, graphic novels that were self-contained stories about characters already existed. They were already there. Well, a lot of them just have a writer and artist who just do, they do both, and therefore they're more personal. Okay. Well, you did have that sometimes. John Byrne and Walt Simonson were doing some books like that. But you also had a lot of indie books that are exactly like that. And guess what? They don't sell that well. I mean, they sell well enough to stay profitable for an independent creator or for a smaller publisher, but not well enough for the bigger publishers. So the point I'm making is a lot of the things that people like about manga today were true at a certain point at different points with American comics. American comic audiences changed over time. In fact, shrank over time. What did they shrink from? Television. Television had a big impact. Video games had a big impact. The fact of the matter is, American comic buyers at a certain point stopped buying comics in a way that Japanese comic buyers did not. Although manga apparently had a big decline in the 90s and bounced back. And they had another one somewhere in the 2000s, and they bounced back. So manga has had its ups and downs as well. Any business, any kind of business will. It's a normal cycle. So the idea that manga has a formula that's unbeatable is not really true. But what American comic book companies had to do was adapt to the audience that they had. So when we look at the creation of the Marvel universe, right? It happens at a point when Marvel, we're just going to call them Marvel. I'm not sure if they were still technically Timely or something at the time, or Atlas. They changed names a lot, but we'll just call them Marvel. They were in trouble. Now, they were doing monster books, Westerns. I think Millie the Model was doing okay. So wide variety of comics. You know what they weren't publishing? They weren't publishing superhero books. Okay. Like I said, DC had a few superhero titles, but they were mostly doing a lot of other stuff too. Sci-fi, Western, horror, war, Our Army at War, big, Sergeant Rock. And then DC says, let's start doing some more superhero stuff. And they bring in the Flash, the Silver Age version of the Flash, Green Lantern, etc., and it starts rolling. And Marvel sees this, and Stan Lee says, what the hell? Like, we're going to a bad place. Give it a shot. And so he creates, with Jack Kirby, the Fantastic Four. And one of the interesting things is he decided he was going to try some new things here with superheroes. And one of those is this more concept of a cohesive universe. Now, you had that to an extent in DC Comics. World's Finest, you have crossovers between Batman and Superman and other characters, maybe once in a while too. You had the Justice Society of America. But DC's universe was never quite as cohesive. They were still individual characters in their individual cities, Gotham, Metropolis, that might be real cities too, kind of doing their own thing. But they'd mix once in a while. With the Marvel Universe, it's going to be a much bigger thing. And so you get Spider-Man, and Spider-Man's going to cross over with Fantastic Four fairly early, and with Daredevil. You get Thor, Iron Man, Captain America is going to make a return. You got Giant Man, or well, Ant-Man and Wasp, and then he kind of becomes Giant Man. They're in the Avengers, but there's crossover. They're all sort of set in New York. And that becomes a really cool thing. It becomes a very hip thing and a very popular thing. And it leads DC to start doing that with their characters as well, making a more cohesive universe. So at the same time, where we're seeing sales decline kind of across the board in American comic books because people's attentions are going elsewhere, we have the superhero universe kind of initiated and growing. And it is what keeps the big two alive. Now, a lot of other companies try to jump in on it as well, never as successfully. But if you want to understand why Marvel and DC are largely producing superhero books, they sold. They retained their audience in a way other books did not. And the other books never went away entirely, but the sales dropped. And so you started seeing smaller comic book companies picking those things up and rolling with them, but not doing the kind of numbers that you were getting at Marvel and DC. It became sort of a renaissance in American comic books. It was not a bad choice per se by the publishers, not to say they wouldn't make bad choices here and there. It was what sold. It was what was successful. The American comic book world is shaped by its customers, just like manga is shaped by the customers over there. And manga starts coming over in the 80s. I remember that when I first got into comic books. I think it was Kamiko had the Robotech, thing. They were starting to sprinkle over. We're not massively popular yet, but they were finding their audience. They're going to become even more popular over time. So my point is, there's a certain context. And to simply say that Marvel and DC should just imitate manga, I don't think they can imitate manga in a lot of ways with what they're doing. I don't think that's an option for them. They're sort of tied largely to an American audience and have to produce what the American audience wants. Now, are they producing what the American audience wants right now? I'd say largely they're not, although Absolute Batman's done pretty well. And people are kind of amazed by Absolute Batman, and you're like going, that's what Frank Miller did with The Dark Knight Returns. Basically, right? Grim, gritty, okay. It's kind of that same idea. That's got an audience, but it's got a more mature audience, not a kid audience. I think the kids have mostly they've decamped and gone elsewhere to other things. I don't know that you're getting that back. You could try, but I don't know that you're going to. You got an adult audience. They have certain things they like and certain things they don't, and you need to find them. There is an issue right now with them pushing stuff that is not generally widely popular with their audience, and they need to work on that, without a doubt. They've got to work on that. But a lot of the things, one thing that was brought up is the idea of the parallel Earths and the different times and the different, okay. But a lot of that stuff was created to try to bring people in, right? They were already having issues at certain points. We need more eyes on these books. So they come up with these different concepts to try to generate more excitement, more sales, It wasn't it wasn't necessarily people sitting at the top going, this stuff's working really well. Screw it. We're out. Okay. That does not happen often in business. It can. If you look at the Rural Purge, once upon a time, where new president comes in and says, we're getting rid of Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres. I don't know. I think Hee Haw might have been involved in that, though it might have been syndicated already, etc. We're going to get rid of all these, and we're going to bring in these new, very hip, kind of left-wing shows, All in the Family, etc. And that whole spate of new shows he brought in, all of them failed except All in the Family, which did very well. So he threw away something that was doing well in the ratings for something that bombed. It happens. It happens. And sometimes things like that will happen because of the costs associated. Battlestar Galactica was a very popular TV show, but it was a very expensive TV show. It gets followed up with Buck Rogers, which reused some elements from Battlestar, smaller cast, that manages to last a couple seasons, but ultimately still, it's expensive. That's not so much an issue with comic books, unless you have a particular creator who is expensive. But you can draw a Western book for about what you can draw a superhero book. That's not really an issue. So they were responding to the customers they had, the folks who were showing up, who were putting down money. It's how the sort of fanboys kind of took over. They were willing to buy multiple issues, different covers, etc. So they started catering more towards an older audience because they were spending more money than the kids were at that point. And that's how these things grow. They kind of grow organically. So then suddenly throwing it all into reverse is not maybe as easy as you think. Now, that's not to say American comic companies don't need some help in what they're doing right now. But to say that American comics are lacking, for example, in genres, there is so much indie stuff doing all these interesting things, and some of it's extremely left-wing. And it sells to a particular audience, and some of it's not, and that sells to an audience. But none of it sells as well as old comic books did. Marvel and DC did not sell as well as Dell did back in the day. And none of it's selling as well as manga at the moment. That can shift too. People's tastes do change. Right now, there's a lot of Americans who are super into manga. In a few years, that might change. It might shift. It did shift in American comics. They had a big audience, and it got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And they kept trying to find ways to pump it up, and they'd get good periods and bad periods, and good periods and bad periods, but it generally was heading down. And that's just how this stuff works sometimes. To try to find some arch meaning for why people change. Things get popular, and then they fall out of popularity. Superhero movies were popular. They fell out of popularity. So again, some of that is because of the way they were writing them, but not necessarily entirely by the way they were writing them. They're also very expensive to make, issues like that. But things do shift and change. Westerns were huge, then Westerns weren't as huge anymore. Although Westerns stayed very popular in Europe. And again, you look at that 85 preview, and you look through the 70s, Marvel and DC were still trying to pump out horror books. They were still trying to pump out sci-fi. They were still trying to pump out fantasy. And Conan did extremely well. And that's why a lot of them imitated it. They were still trying to produce other things and find an audience for them. And when something like Conan found an audience, Marvel didn't go, well, it's not superheroes, so get rid of it. They held on to it. And you had Conan, and you had Conan the King, and you had Cole, and you had a couple attempts at other things, and you had Savage Sword of Conan, and you had Conan Saga. Oh, Marvel embraced Conan because Conan made money. The biggest difference now is they're not as concerned with making money. Now, that's partly because they're owned by massive companies that really just want the IPs for merchandising, for other entertainment venues, and they don't care about the comic books. Now, this is stupid, and it probably won't continue, honestly. Las Vegas, once upon a time, you had a lot of resort hotels with essentially independent ownership. And the attitude they had was, we make so much money off the gaming, we just want to keep people rolling in to gamble. Keep the rooms cheap, keep the food cheap, keep the other entertainment cheap. That'll keep the place full, and we'll make our money off gaming. Over time, they were bought by corporations, and the corporations said, everything needs to be a profit center. Everything needs to be a profit center. And prices went up, and now we're dealing with a place where prices might have gone up too much. They're having to pull back a little bit because we're losing some visitation as a result. But to allow the comic book arm of this stuff to produce things that are, generally speaking, not that popular and not doing well against competitors is weird. And it probably won't continue. But they're such a small component that I think they kind of fly under the radar, but probably not forever. There will come a time. There will come a time when the corporate masters say, why aren't you selling as well as manga? Make it happen. We're going to find somebody who will. Who knows what they'll produce then? But there you go. That is my rant. I don't know if I was ranting exactly, but that's my rant about American comics and manga. Manga is not bulletproof. American comics did just about everything manga does at some point in the past, and it failed. It was rejected by audiences, by the mass audience. But it didn't go away completely. That stuff's still out there. You just have to look for it. There are comic books beyond Marvel and DC. They're not everything. And they're becoming less as time goes by. So there we go. Let's catch up with the chat. Manowar says the NAM comes to mind. Yeah, there you go. Now, and it was successful for a while. And that was in the 80s. So they're still trying out something new, a war comic. And the war comics were starting to go away from DC at that point. You had GI Combat with the Haunted Tank, and you had Dr. Rock. You had Sergeant Rock. But they were starting to come to the end of their runs when the NAM comes along. That was big. And I never jumped into it really, and I kind of regretted it. But you also at that point, and these are sort of superhero-y, but we were talking about Rom and the Micronauts, but you had Transformers, you had G.I. Joe. Marvel started the Star comic line, which was more aimed at kids with some funny book kind of characters and stuff. They were still trying. They really were. Love DC's Weird War Tales. Oh God, I loved Weird War Tales. Its run ended soon after I started actively collecting. Yeah, and it was there was a little bit of anger, I think, over that within, because, and I don't know if this was the end of the Creature Commandos or if that was also the end of Weird War Tales. I think it was both ended at the same time. If you look at the Creature Commandos' last story, when they are shot off into space to be kind of destroyed, Robert Kanigher, their writer, was with them. Like there's this dude walking into the spaceship that nobody's ever seen before. And it was kind of like Kanigher being kind of pissed that DC canceled it, But look, they got to do what the audience really wants. And if other books, they can only publish so many books at a time. There's only so much bandwidth for any company. So the stuff that's selling well is going to continue. The stuff that doesn't do as well goes away. I mean, we talk about how it's all superheroes, but okay, it's always Batman, it's always Superman, it's always Spider-Man. Yeah, but think of all the characters and all the books that came and went. Booster Gold, Blue Beetle. This is like from the 80s. Ms. Marvel, She-Hulk. She had a couple series. Spider-Woman was another one. If a superhero book didn't do well, they canceled it. They didn't just go, well, it's superheroes, so it's sticking around no matter what, which is kind of what they do now with some of these books that don't necessarily do as well. And I got a mustache hair that's curling up on me. So, what can I say? Ramey Butler comes in. Hey, Ramey, how's it going, sir? Also love Weird War Tales, G.I. Robot. Yeah. Oh yeah. That was awesome stuff. That was I started collecting like G.I. Combat. That was my favorite before I ever got into superhero books. I had G.I. Combat, and I had a couple, I think it was like Our World at War was maybe from Charlton or something. I had a Sergeant Rock, a couple of those. Yeah. Oh, I love those things. The Black and White Conan mags. Oh God, I bought those. I bought the Black and White Conan mags after I'd stopped buying the superhero stuff. I stuck with Conan because I could get that at like 7-Elevens still. It was easy to find those. So Titans Conan, yeah. And then we got Archie still going. Raimi buys those, and that's about the only thing he does buy. Yeah, I mean, but think about it. Archie's managed to survive, and it's like they got a lot of different stuff. I mean, my favorite stuff is the old Archie stuff that DeCarlo and Lucy were doing, but they've done horror. You know, Archie tries out a lot of different things. Are they all massively successful? No. I think part of the reason manga is so successful at the moment is because it just sort of became a thing. Like, that's what people are doing. So that's where the attention goes, you know, and they do hear a lot about the, well, American comics are just superheroes. And it's like, dude, go to a friggin' comic shop. Go to a comic shop. You're going to find a lot of stuff there that's not superheroes. Go online, check out some Kickstarters. There's a lot of stuff that's not superhero that you could be buying, but it's that manga style. And by the way, goes very well with anime. And manga becomes anime, but anime also gets people into that mindset, right? So there was a lot of success at one point with the X-Men cartoon that created a lot of X-Men readers. Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, right? Justice League Unlimited, Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes. I'm finishing up actually watching it. I love that cartoon. It was really well done, and it introduced the Marvel characters pretty well. I mean, they modified them a little bit, but they weren't too far off from what they were, you know, in the old comics. Why aren't we bringing that out now? You know, well, part of the problem is if you take the existing comics, turn them into cartoons, they might not do that well. And because of the subject matter. Although Absolute Batman, if you turn that into a cartoon right now, that might work. You know, it's pretty popular. But again, it does, I think, skew more towards an older audience. And you got to find the older audience that wants to sit and watch the cartoons. But they're kind of there. But it could certainly get people into it. So are they planning that? Are they doing that? They don't. Has James Gunn mentioned anything about Absolute Batman? Then it's not happening. It's not happening. And it probably should. And look, this is coming from somebody, I have no interest in Absolute Batman at all. But it's obviously doing very well. What are you doing? So there is an issue with the corporation and how it works right now, for sure. But just saying, well, make American comics more like manga, they've done that in the past. They even did manga versions of some of their characters. They had a little audience, but they didn't do well enough to stick around. I think the bigger problem for America is Americans over the last 50, 60 years just don't care about comic books. And more of them. They just don't care. They're doing other things, social media, video games, etc. That's like the cool thing to talk about with your friends, not the comic books. We're more niche. Comic strips used to be massive. Massive. Comic strips aren't massive anymore. You know, a lot of newspapers are just getting rid of them. So, I mean, it's a shift in what people in America like. That's where these companies are based, and that's who they got to sell to. You know, and the European comics, they're designed for the European audience. And they're more into that. And the Japanese are more into manga. Although I have heard people say a lot of folks who are super into anime and manga, especially anime, I think, they think, oh, it's going to be awesome if I go to Japan because everybody in Japan watches this stuff, you know. And it was an American who lives over in Japan who was kind of saying, here's some things you think, but here's the reality. And he goes, to be honest with you, it's kind of a nerd thing in Japan too. Maybe a little bit more mainstream than in America at this point. But he goes, no, it's not like everybody is super into this stuff, especially the stuff that's a little weirder. It's, you know, there's a niche element to it over there as well. So yeah, anyways, I think a lot of it just has to do with your customer base and what they want. And granted, at the moment, I think they could increase their sales by changing how they're doing some stuff, and being maybe a little bit more rigorous about it. But I think you just have to deal with the fact that there's a particular audience size. It is what it is. And at the moment, it's probably not growing. You could probably boost it a little and then it'll probably go back down a little. It just is what it is, guys. It is what it is. It's not necessarily about superior versus inferior. It's just things kind of change over time. The main thing is, if you love comic books, buy comic books, read the stories, find the stuff you like, seek it out. Once upon a time, we all had to do that kind of stuff, especially if you're into things that were a little more fringe. You found the fanzines, you found the websites, right? You went to used bookstores to look for stuff. You went to record stores, and you flipped through to find all these bands, because not hard to find Duran Duran, not hard to find Metallica at a certain point in time, but there were a lot of bands that were cool that weren't necessarily as popular, and you had to go look for them. So go look for them. And if it means we're a smaller audience, we're not the majority, who cares? Just like the stuff you like. Embrace the smaller community. Dude, trying to make American superheroes mainstream hasn't really worked out that well, because the mainstream don't like these things. They think they're stupid, at least in terms of Hollywood. And they started screwing with them a lot. If we could maybe get those folks to not be interested anymore, might actually be good. And things might get back more to the roots, of adventure fiction. But at any rate, oh, hey, Genuine Comics, man. Cool. I love your stuff, man. I have not read the digital yet of Perfect 10 #6. I need to, but I like flipping through things better. So I was kind of like, well, maybe I'll wait till the deliver, but I need to read that. Perfect 10 is awesome. Love that stuff. You talk about, there are good superhero comics out there, folks. There are. And Genuine is one of the folks who puts out really good superhero stuff. You should check that stuff out if you haven't. So there we go. There's my little rant on manga and on American comics. Basically, it's called market forces, folks. It's called market forces. And I think at this point, it's also mega corporations, but they're like Genuine Comics. There are a lot of indies out there putting out awesome stuff. Support them. If you don't like what Marvel and DC are doing, go looking for other stuff. It's there. It's there. Don't just get angry. If Disney's not giving you the Star Wars you want, stop buying their Star Wars and go look for cool stuff that is being produced, and give it your time and your attention. And, it's cool to complain about the stuff because it's annoying. It's especially annoying when somebody takes a really great IP and kind of makes it crappy, or at least unpopular. But, don't put all your attention, all your energy into complaining. Put some of that energy into finding the cool stuff that's out there. I see people putting out sci-fi books like crazy. There's cool stuff out there. There are people doing indie movies, Go check that stuff out. Give them an audience. Talk about it, like on Twitter. If you see stuff you dig, talk about it on Twitter. Put it out there for other people. I find so much stuff that way. I find so much stuff watching YouTube videos. Like a lot of the TV shows that I've been talking about for the last couple of years on here, I found because I was listening to other people talk about them. And they're old TV shows. They're not even new. But they weren't around. It like when living in Las Vegas when I didn't see them. I didn't know about them. They talk about them. I go find them and like, holy shit, I love this. I just finished a second viewing, because I am going to do a review on it, of a German sci-fi show, which I probably will pronounce poorly, but we'll do the English version. Space Patrol Orion is kind of what it's called. Raum Patrol Orion would be, but there's actually a much longer title. It's 7 episodes, and it's really friggin' good. It basically premieres about a week after Star Trek premieres in the United States. So it's really interesting to look at these two shows and have a lot of similarities and look at where the differences are and maybe think about why those differences are there. But it's a really good one. And the final episode, the 7th episode, is really good. It was real. I've watched it before, and I was watching it last night, and I'm like kind of, going, oh, are they going to win? Are they going to win? Like, are they going to survive? I mean, it was still getting me, even though I'd seen it before. It is obviously, it's subtitled in English. It's in German, but it's really good. I found out about it because I think I was looking for something else that somebody had talked about. And I'm like, oh, what's this thing? You know, give it a try. It's on YouTube. Probably shouldn't be, but it is. So, I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff out there, folks. Go find it. Go talk about it. And then we'll all have a much better time. And yeah, you know, mock the MCU and mock James Gunn and mock Star Wars, because there's a lot of mockable stuff there. I think even if you like some of it, you can still admit some of it's a little off, but mostly focus on cool stuff, because that's going to help creators make more money and make more of that cool stuff and get more attention. And it might also inspire some of these companies to go, ooh, maybe we need to stop doing this and we need to start doing that. That might be better, you know. But if it's all just complaining, they'll ignore it. Hollywood egos, they will ignore it. I promise you that. So let's look at a few. Before I do coming attractions, I wanted to do a little bit of new acquisitions. I'm going to bring this up. I showed this off last time, the Batmobile, 89 Batmobile. And I said, yeah, it would have been cool if the machine guns. Yeah, well, here's the thing. Yeah, there's machine guns. The machine guns were underneath it. I know that's not a great, there we go, kind of, you can see. It was right on the side of the box. I didn't look at the side of the box. So it does come with machine guns that you basically just pop on. God, getting those off might be tricky, but I went ahead and kept them on just in case you didn't see it last time. There's a little Batman figure inside. It was a neat little toy. The Batmobiles, to me, a little bit cheapy. I think they could have made something a little nicer for the price, but okay. I did hit the comic book shop yesterday. Grabbed the new facsimile, Black Panther. Very, very cool. Can't wait. I don't think I've ever read this one, so I'm looking forward to that. Oh, look at this. Look at this. Whoops, there we go. Oh, I love it. You get the Inhumans in here as well. That is rad. That's Kirby, but God, that picture of Johnny almost had a Ditko flair to it. I also grabbed the Archie's Valentine's Spectacular just for fun. And I'll be honest, I mostly dig these because of the old stuff, because I absolutely freaking love the that art from back in the day. Oh, what do we got up here from Raimi? Absolute lineup in DC is interesting. Yeah, it's not for everybody, but it's done pretty darn well. Raimi says, I got a buddy. He runs Atari 7800 forever. He makes pretty good indie films. There you go. Get that stuff out there. Talk about it. And you can always watch Kamen Rider or Ultraman. Exactly. And one of the problems modern entertainment has is it's competing with 100 years. Really, I mean, a film. You know, probably 80 years of television, 90, almost 100 years of comic books, literature, going a little further back, you know. It's difficult to keep producing good stuff that can compete with the past, although people do sort of forget the past here and there, which gives you opportunities. You know, if there's a concept you'd like, resurrect it with your own spin on it and get it out there. The other book I actually bought a new book, not knowing much about it. Spirit of the Shadows. And it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It has a sort of Ditko-esque vibe to some of the, you know, backgrounds there of this spirit world. It sets up some actually interesting ideas for this character, that it is this man who died. He has gone into the spirit realm, and he has that costume because it's the costume he was wearing when he died. What is that all about? Well, we don't quite know yet. He is a violinist. There was a woman he loved, okay, and he wants to rejoin with her in the sacred realm, but he's got to get out of the spirit realm first, and that involves judgment. And so he's given this book about his life. Don't lose it. There's only one, and you have to have it to be judged. And so he's looking through it, and he sees he's forgotten his past. So he sees him meeting this woman, right? Very nice. And then all of a sudden, these weird creatures in the spirit realm, one of them grabs the book, bites it, rips it up. The pages are scattered. And he's like, oh my God, I got to get these back. And so that's kind of one of his little missions, but he doesn't know. Was he a good man? Was he a bad man? He doesn't know entirely. And that's a really kind of a cool concept. So there's some interesting stuff. I think I'm going to stick with it. Spirit of the Shadows, by a story by Daniel Ziegler and Nick Cagnetti. Art and colors, Nick Cagnetti. Letters, Farron Delgado. Designer, Winston Gambro. Editor, Carl Bowlers. From Oni Lion Forge Publishing Group, LLC. That would be Limited Liability Company. That means that if the company goes belly up, you're only liable for the amount of money you kind of put into the company. They can't go after your personal finances elsewhere. Just thought I'd bring that up. In my business, I deal with a lot of LLCs. So that was actually pretty cool. I kind of liked it. And I grabbed a few back issues, not a ton these days. Cloak and Dagger, number 2 and number 3 from the limited series. I now have the full limited series. Still need the Mutant Misadventures books. Still need some of the Strange Tales books, and then I'll have the complete Cloak and Dagger. Avengers number 228 to fill a gap in a run I'm working on. Detective Comics. Again, also, that's kind of what I'm doing now, is filling gaps in things that I own. Batman. I believe, yeah, Brayfogle. Why did I get rid of those? And an Action Comics. And also I grabbed the New Gods because they were having a sale. And man, there's only, what, I think 11 or 12 issues of New Gods. And I now have the facsimile of issue 1, and I have this. So I'm going, could conceivably collect that whole thing without too much difficulty. So that's really it. That's the only new stuff I kind of got in the den this week. Nothing battery operated like that, but there you go. Ramey Butler, I would love if the Absolute line would reintroduce all of DC's fantasy and World War II war comics. Yeah, I don't know, man. They could, but I don't know if they're going to go that direction. It seems to have kind of a gritty urban thing going. But, yeah, the problem, though, is it doesn't sell as well. It just doesn't sell as well, unfortunately, these days. We're fans. We'll buy stuff like that. I mean, I bought the 2 facsimiles they've done with Sergeant Rock recently, and I'd buy more. I mean, if they started printing GI Combat from issue 1 and just doing facsimiles, I'd buy them. Probably buy every damn one, but most people won't. That's the issue. So there we go. New releases, new campaigns coming up. I saw this pop up from Cartoon Logic. Famous Studios Champion Collection Blu-ray. Now, I actually found it Amazon, $30 for Blu-ray, $25 for DVD. Releasing in April 21st. 18 cartoons, and I believe these are restored, including cartoons with characters like Little Audrey, Baby Huey, Herman the Mouse, and Casper, the Friendly Ghost. So it's some cartoons that have sort of fallen between the cracks. If you think about, you got they're restoring like a lot of Fleischer stuff, Betty Boop, Popeye, etc. Obviously, Disney does some of that, although maybe not as much as they used to. Some good Warner Brothers stuff. There's a lot of cartoons that are they're not from a major, producer back in the day. They don't have a major fan base, but it's nice to see some of those getting restored and put out there. So that's coming out. Yeah, Ramey says Famous does not get enough love. I agree, man. It's all worth watching. It's all worth watching. And a lot of times it's creators that were doing stuff better at MGM or Warner's, moving around a little bit. So That's coming out, again, releases April 21st. $30, it says, for Blu-ray, $25 for DVD. This is a comic that is, you can't jump into it just yet. I believe it's on Kickstarter, yeah. But you could sign up. So it's coming soon. Magni the Mighty, number 0 through issue 2. Norse mythology comic set in the post-Ragnarok era. Now in the Norse myths that have survived, after Ragnarok, Thor is killed. His hammer is inherited by his sons, Magni and Modi. And this is obviously Magni wielding Mjolnir. It is from Devin Arscott. Story apparently involves Magni going up against Balder to protect the 9 realms. Now, in the myths, Balder returns from hell after Ragnarok to become the new king of the gods. So apparently, he's having some issues with Magni. We'll have to find out when this comes out. Coming out, I think it's going to launch February 3rd, so just in a couple days. Art looked pretty cool. Cool concept, so you might want to check that one out. Raimi Famous was run by the other brother who did the classic Betty Boop. Oh, yeah. And basically, Fleischer became famous. So you have like the Fleischer Supermans, and then you have the famous Supermans, and they are a little bit different. But yeah, it is tied with Fleischer. So cool that those are getting out there. And yes, this is set after Ragnarok. I remember thinking of doing, at one point, like a D&D campaign, or maybe writing something up for my old role-playing game magazine that I used to do. Like post-apocalyptic Norse mythology. Seemed like an interesting place to go. But at any rate, we do. The only other things I really have here are a bunch of Marvel and DC facsimiles that are coming out. They've released what they're putting out in April. Let's take a look at some of those. Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, number 115. This is for April. Action Comics number 454. Oh, wait, I missed something. Hold on. Oh, I missed World's Finest 195. Action Comics 454. Man of Steel number 1. I'm assuming they're gonna do all those. Dark Knight Returns number 3, and they are doing all the Dark Knight Returns, the floppies. They're reissuing all of those. And also Detective Comics number 577. And you'll notice a couple of those involve Jimmy Olsen. They're working on a Jimmy Olsen TV show with the dude who played Jimmy in that Superman movie. So I'm wondering if that's part of the tie-in. I gotta say, I don't really watch most of the DCU or MCU stuff nowadays, but I like when it turns into a facsimile of a comic that I either can't afford or just don't want to have to try to find. So that's pretty good, pretty cool. And then in March from DC, and I think I covered these before, but I figured I'd just show them off again. Obviously, Dark Knight Returns number 2, Detective 475, The Smiling Fish, Action Comics number 242, Brainiac. Brainiac, I think, is supposed to be in the Supergirl movie. That's probably why they're putting that out there. And Wonder Woman number 1. I reviewed that not too long ago on my channel. Detective number 576. Part of the year 2. Batman year 2. So some cool stuff there. Archie is putting out a couple facsimiles themselves in April. Archie number 125. We got a little monster stuff in that one. And in March, the Betty and Veronica pinup special, number 1, and Betty and Me, number 1. So they're working the facsimiles too. They seem to be something worthwhile. And I'm hoping some of these companies go, like regular books get reprintings and reprintings and reprintings to keep them viable and out there. Why don't we just do that? Like, why don't we just pick it up? Like last year, They did the first 12 issues of Fantastic Four, obviously to tie in with the movie. Why not keep doing it this year? 13 through 24. I'd buy them. I bet a lot of people would. Do them the year after that. Why don't you just start reprinting some of your best comics from the beginning? They used to kind of do that in Marvel Tales and Classic X-Men. Why not? Why not? You can reorder all old Archie comics in black and white. Just send in an order form. Oh, is that right? Is that from the Archie store? Or is that from someone else, Ramey? Including the Red Circle line. Oh, that's very interesting. It's good. Get that stuff out there. And I bet it would, I love the color, but I bet it would work fine in black and white. It's such clean line work. When you look at what DeCarlo and Lucy could do. And Alex Toth was the same way, doing different stuff. So friggin' clean. It looks so nice. Does not need to be overly complicated. Marvel's April facsimiles are Ms. Marvel number 20. And I'm not positive if I have the original or not, but that's a collection I'm trying to put together, so I might for sure grab it. Silver Surfer number 2. Spider-Man Noir number 1. So if you missed out on that the first time, you got another chance here. And in March, they're putting out Phoenix, the Untold Story, number 1. And of course, Silver Surfer number 1. So are we going to get 12 issues of Silver Surfer? Or as many? That'd be cool. Maybe we will. I don't know. But I will definitely going to get those. Oh, it's the only way to get the Archie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles line. Okay, from the Archie store. Have to look into that. I will have to look into that. So that is coming in April, and also in April, sort of from Marvel, the release of John Byrne's X-Men Elsewhere. Now, this is going to be several volumes, and these are X-Men stories, I think primarily set in the Savage Land, that John Byrne just wrote and drew on his own and put on his website. And they were just pencils. He didn't even ink them. I don't think. I think it was just pencils. And I read a few of them, and they're good. It's like real X-Men. So they're so good that Marvel is going to release them. Now, it's through another company as well that they're doing it. Again, there's going to be several volumes in over the next year or maybe year or two. But I think well worth your attention on it. It's like classic Byrne kind of X-Men stuff, you know. Very, very cool. By the way, a lot of that information I got on those solicitations for March and April, I saw on captaincomics.ning.com. So you might want to check that website out. I saw something on Twitter. I popped over to there. Like to shout it out because I did use that resource. All right, we're almost done here, folks. I got one little review to do, well, besides that comic I talked about. It's called Stolen Face. It is a 1952 Hammer film noir starring Paul Henreid, Elizabeth Scott, and Andre Morel. And it's a pretty decent little film noir. It is basically about a man, a plastic surgeon, has a brief affair with a concert pianist. And he falls madly in love with her. And he wants to marry her. Problem is, she has a fiance. They both meet at sort of kind of like a bed and breakfast. And, you know, she didn't mean to sort of fall in love with the guy. And so she leaves, kind of without a word. And when he calls, she's like, I can't talk to him. Because she's already got a fiance. It's actually her manager. So this guy's kind of distraught and a little PO'd. Well, one of the things he does in his work, he works at a prison where he does plastic surgery on prisoners who have like defects, scars, things like that. Because there's a belief that if they aren't scarred, maybe they'll give up crime. They'll be able to fit more into society better, etc. There's a woman there who has a really bad scar on her face. And so he's going to help her. but he gets a little obsessed, and he makes her look like the woman he loved. And he falls in love with that image, even though this woman is very different from that concert pianist. Obviously, she was a criminal, and they even refer to her sort of a psychopath. They may have been a little looser with that term then than now. So, of course, what happens is the concert pianist, realizing she's in love with him, sort of dumps the manager and wants to go back. And what does she find? So that's kind of the tangle, the triangle. It's pretty good. I think they could have ramped up the tension a little more. And I think they could have ramped up his obsession a little more. Make him a little bit crazier than he was. I think that might have improved the film. It has a great final line. But at any rate, it is called Stolen Face. Oh, I did have a couple images from it. There we see Henreid. Is it Henreid? I don't know how to pronounce his name. I now realize. That almost looks like Jan in the Pan that he's working on. But that's him giving the woman her new face. And, of course, everything kind of comes to a boil on a train at night. But it was, honestly, pretty darn good. Not one of the greatest film noirs I ever saw, but it's a solid little film. God, what was it? Maybe an hour and a half or something like that. If you got some time, you might want to check out Stolen Face. It's a Hammer film, but not Hammer horror. Although there's maybe a horror vibe to it in a way. And that's really the only kind of thing that I got time to watch this last week that I had never seen before. So let's finish with my favorite thing on the internet this week. This actually goes back to my last live stream when I was talking about the He-Man movie, the trailer they just released. And I said, remember how in the old He-Man cartoon, they kind of rotoscoped, they traced over actual body movements. And so multiple characters would move the exact same way in certain scenes. And I said, they ought to do that in the movie. Like each of those moves, they ought to have at least one actor sort of do that. It'd be kind of funny. And then what happens to pop up on Twitter, but a picture of the folks who they actually filmed with those movements. You see somebody dressed up like Teela and He-Man and Skeletor there. Those are the people. And if you look real close, they have lines on their faces to help the animators when they were doing the tracing. But those are the people who actually were filmed for their movements for the old Masters of the Universe cartoon. I didn't say I want a 12-inch penis. I am going to the theater to watch He-Man. Yeah, it might actually be okay. It's hard to say. Like I was saying last week, I think there's potential there. But man, it's always in the execution. And the execution in Hollywood has not been good lately. But I think the potential is definitely there. Maybe they can pull it off. It'd be great. Just a fun fantasy action film that's maybe a little bit goofy because it's Masters of the Universe, which is a little goofy. That would be so cool if they could do it and pull it off. I hope they do. I really hope they do. But we'll see. We will see. And Raimi was talking about John Byrne being awesome. Man of War agrees. So do I. I was the same way. If Byrne was on the book, I was there. I've been reading a lot of the old West Coast Avengers, and he did a good run on that. And it's just the art is so friggin' good. Every character looks good when they're drawn by Byrne, and it's like more of that for sure. My trust in modernity is at an all-time low. Yeah, me too, sir. It really is. Somebody online was talking about really only watching pre-2000 entertainment. And I said, you need pre-2000 entertainment to sort of cope with post-2000 reality. It's been weird and it's been rough, and we're still going through weird, rough stuff. So it's nice to go watch some older stuff from maybe when things were a little less crazy, but certainly better produced, certainly better produced. Raimi, by the way, I'm looking for the big plastic toy cars, the El Cheapo 2-color blow molded. From a particular company. Big plastic toy cars. El Cheapo. Yeah, I don't know, man. Is it from a particular toy maker? I'll keep my eyes open if I know, maybe a little closer. But yeah, I think, man, they did used to make just some cool stuff like that, didn't they? Remember when you just, like, toys could just be a car? Like, there was no corporate tie-in. It was just a car. Look at this cool car. And you could drive it around your house on your, on your hands and knees, and all that stuff. It was just a car. Oh, those were good times. Around in the 80s. Okay, man. Oh, I'll keep a look. So are you sure they're blow molded for, like specifically blow molded? But I'll keep an eye on. Sports cars, really mostly sports cars kind of things, or different. Yeah. If you got any images, dude, like, shoot it to me somewhere. You can find me. You can find my email online. I think I've talked to you email wise before. Yeah. But yeah, if you got any images, shoot them over to me and I'll keep my eyes open. So I think that will do it. Oh, well, they're made by the plastic. Well, I figured they're made by plastic companies. Yeah. But you mean like companies that primarily did maybe other plastics as well? I got you. Yeah, I'll keep my eyes open. So coming up this week in Dad's Den, provided I get my ass in gear and actually make these videos today and edit one of them, we got Thor number 341 on Monday, Mighty Thor Monday, continuing this year, Walt Simonson's run. On Wednesday, I'm going to have a review up of Spider-Man, in other words, Japanese Spider-Man, their live-action tokusatsu. Very fun little show. And on Friday, I'm going to do a little flip-through review of a very cool book from 2000 called TV Sets. That is basically a guy who created blueprints for a lot of the TV homes from like the 50s to the 70s. Stuff he grew up watching in reruns. This dude actually drew the blueprints as best as he could. And this is before, he was primarily working before VCRs and stuff. So he had to watch these shows like religiously and take notes and draw as he watched them. And it's really kind of cool. So we're going to look at that on Friday. Hopefully you will tune in. Emissary of Hell, Spider-Man. Yes, that is the guy. That is the guy. So that's coming up in Dad's Den. This is going to do it for Live in the Den. Hope everybody had a little bit of fun. Hopefully I didn't rant too long about manga and American comics. But we'll end as we always do. God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. And I will hopefully see you again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.